Can Charles Leclerc leave Ferrari just when a new era begins in Formula One? And why is your environment already talking to McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston Martin while he still has a contract until 2029? The trigger was invisible to the public eye. There were no explosive statements or gestures on the radio. But while the microphones were turned off, Nicolas Toteman, who manages every contractual aspect of Leclerc's career, was already moving through the halls of rival teams. The scenario could not be more symbolic. The Grand Prix of Italy in Monza, the Ferrari temple, the place where tifosi venerate their idols with an almost religious devotion. Right there, on a quiet Sunday morning, Tote gathered face to face with Andrea Stella, McLaren's team director. It was not a superficial talk. It was a long, technical, and deliberate conversation. They talked about contracts, calendars, regulations. Future scenarios were screened. And most importantly, the possibility of Leclerc, even under contract with Ferrari until 2029, could be addressed to the Woking team in the era after 2026. None of this would have come to light if it were not because the specialized Italian press that is rarely wrong in these matters began to filter details that made clear that breakfast was not a courtesy. It was a first sign. A few days later, Tote also saw Toto Wolff, Mercedes' strong man, and later with Lawrence Stroll, the millionaire behind the rebirth of Aston Martin. These meetings, carefully measured and without media presence, followed the same pattern. Talk about the project beyond the immediate. Not from 2025 but from 2026 onwards, when Formula One enters a new era with more efficient engines, new aerodynamic norms, and a paradigm shift in the competitive hierarchy. And it is precisely that duality that this critical moment does. Leclerc is not gone, but has already drawn the routes to do so if necessary. He has tested the land, has analyzed alternatives, and has sent a clear message to Ferrari. Time is exhausted. There is no room for empty promises. Or the 2026 car is up to your aspirations, or you will look for a team that is. Not by whim, but for competitive survival. Here we do not talk only about strategy. We talk about a pilot who has given his best years to a team that, so far, has not lived up to his talent. We talked about a project that was presented as Ferrari's renaissance, and which, despite important advances, still does not crown its star pilot. And we talk about an environment, that of Leclerc, that is no longer willing to wait forever. The silence that wraps these negotiations is as deafening as the roar of a thorough car. Because what is not said, what is not shouting, is what has the most weight. And if Ferrari does not respond soon with facts, not with speeches, it is most likely that this silence becomes an exit that will forever change the Formula One map. When Charles Leclerc renewed his contract with Ferrari in 2024, the announcement was presented as a solid, almost unbreakable alliance, which would take the Monegasque pilot to the top next to the Scuderia. But behind the optimistic headlines and the photos with tense smiles, there was a detail that few noticed, and that today changes everything. A series of carefully written clauses that allow it to escape. A letter under the sleeve that could end up being the most powerful weapon that Leclerc has if he decides to close his cycle with Ferrari earlier than expected. The agreement, signed at the beginning of 2024, was one of the most extensive of the grill, and on paper projected contractual stability until 2029. But that duration, far from being a guarantee for Ferrari, is actually a minefield of conditions. According to sources close to Paddock, the contract includes performance clauses directly linked to the competitive success of the car in 2026, the year of the great technical change in Formula One. We are not talking about generic clauses. These conditions are specifically designed to assess whether Ferrari delivers a car capable of fighting consistently for victories and, at least, by the podium. The logic of these clauses is simple. If Ferrari does not meet a series of technical and sports objectives established internally as Leclerc reference points, may activate its output option without legal or economic consequences. This, in effect, transforms an apparently armored contract into a conditional pact, where the commitment is subject to concrete results. A contract that looks more like a temporary truce than a long-term alliance. And here comes the strategy. Leclerc has not made these conditions public, but the leaks are constant. For months there has been talk in the paddock environment of a contract that breathes tension. On the one hand, Ferrari desperately needs his star pilot staying, because without him they lose not only an elite talent, but a key media figure. On the other, Leclerc has learned, after years of disappointments, that he cannot deposit his career in promises. He is willing to stay but not blind. The economic progression of the contract is also revealing. Leclerc began with a base salary of 25 million euros per year, an already high, but structured figure to climb over the years until reaching 50 million in 2029. However, this growth is not guaranteed. It is conditioned to the permanence of the pilot. If Leclerc activates its output clause before 2026, not only leaves the team, also renounces that salary evolution. What shows that your priority is not money but the sports project. All this raises a crucial question. Why sign such a long contract if there was no longer full confidence? The answer is in context. By 2024, Ferrari needed to send a message of stability. The arrival of Lewis Hamilton generated internal and media pressure. Showing that Leclerc was also committed was necessary to avoid an ego's war or a replacement narrative. That is why the contract was signed. But that is why the clauses were also included. Leclerc agreed to be alone if a decent exit was guaranteed if things did not work. These types of agreements are not new in F1, but what differentiates the case of Leclerc is the moment and political weight that it has within Ferrari. He is not just any pilot. It is the face of the project for 5 years. He is the man who lifted the team after the 2019 motor scandal. He is the pilot who has brought mediocre cars to the limit, classifying in front of Red Bull and Mercedes when it seemed impossible. Its value is not measured only at points but in what it represents. And that's why your possible exit would be more than a loss. It would be a symbolic fracture. Charles Leclerc is not simply exploring alternatives. It is evaluating high-level projects that can align with its largest ambition, to be world champion. And he is doing it with a strategic coldness that we had not seen before. What you are looking for is not just a competitive car. Look for structural stability, technical leadership, and a clear vision for the post-2026 era. In that context, the 3 teams with which their surroundings have started McLaren conversations, Mercedes and Aston Martin, represent 3 radically different project models, each with their strengths, each with their risks. McLaren represents, perhaps, the most seductive option from the purely competitive. The MCL39 has not only demonstrated a devastating career rhythm, but a tactical consistency that was not seen in the team since the golden years of the Häkkinen era. Under the direction of Andrea Stella, McLaren has achieved what seemed impossible 2 years ago, to overcome Red Bull and Ferrari in technical development, track strategy and career execution. The domain shown in the first major awards of 2025, with Lando Norris leading the championship and Oscar Piastri signing star performances, is proof that the British team has crossed the threshold of the aspirational and has been installed in the real elite of the category. But not everything is good news. McLaren has a problem. He has no free space in his alignment. Both Norris and Piastri have firm contracts until 2027. Breaking one of those agreements is not simple or cheap. And although the possibility that Norris will make the leap to Red Bull or that Piastri is tempted by another project is not discharged, today there is no guaranteed seat for Leclerc. What there is interest. Stella knows the value of having a pilot like Charles in the structure. If the opportunity opens, McLaren would not hesitate. The technical project is ready. It only needs the whole. Mercedes, on the other hand, offers something else. Not a perfect car today, but an organization that is rebuilding with ambition and intelligence. Toto Wolff is no stranger to long cycles, and since the fall of his hegemony has worked in silence to redefine the DNA of the team. In 2025, the duo Russell-Antonelli represents a mixture of present and future, but also a window for change. George Russell has been consistent but not dominant, and Kimi Antonelli, although talented, remains a long-term bet. In that scenario, Leclerc fits as the technical and emotional leader that Mercedes may need to return to the throne. With Hamilton's departure, there has been a symbolic vacuum that Russell has not been able to fill out at all. And although the car still suffers in high aerodynamic circuits, the improvements introduced have shown a clear progression. In addition, Mercedes's financial and infrastructure capacity has no rival. If Leclerc wants to build a new legacy from scratch, this would be the ideal place. Unlike McLaren, Mercedes could open a short-term seat without having to dismantle his current project. And then there is Aston Martin, the outsider. The riskiest project, but also the one that can surprise the most if the pieces fit. Under Lawrence Stroll leadership, Aston has invested astronomical sums in infrastructure, key signings and technological development. The new campus in Silverstone is a symbol of that ambition. But the most important thing is still missing: the results. The AMR 25 has shown flashes, but also many inconsistencies. Fernando Alonso, the pillar of the project, could be retired soon. And Lance Stroll, despite having the confidence of his father, has failed to perform at the level that is expected of a car in the top 5. That's where Leclerc enters. His signing would be a radical change of paradigm. I would turn Aston Martin into a factory team with a frontline pilot. The arrival of Charles would open the door to attract more technical talent, more sponsors and more sports credibility. But it also implies a risk, joining a team that has not yet proven to hold a championship until the end. Here, Leclerc would have to bet on the potential, not for reality. A high-risk play but extraordinary reward if it works. Each team offers something different. McLaren, immediate performance. Mercedes, structural stability and growth margin. Aston Martin, total freedom and the possibility of leading a project from its foundations. And everyone knows. That is why they have received Nicolas Todt with the doors open. Because when a pilot like Charles Leclerc puts himself on the market, the entire Formula One is reconfigured. The true tragedy, however, is not in the results but in perception. Ferrari does not convey trust. From its directive dome to its boxes, a lack of clear leadership is perceived. Each season begins with a renewed speech. Each car is presented as the turning point. Each failure is justified with a "we are learning." But the years pass and the titles do not arrive. And now, when the calendar marks the prelude to a crucial regulatory change, the team seems to be once again improvising instead of anticipating. This is precisely what has led Leclerc to move. It is not a betrayal. It is a rational reading of the times. He has put his career at the Ferrari service since 2019. He has won races with cars that they didn't deserve to win. He has supported mechanical failures, erratic decisions, and an Italian press that does not forgive. He has been patient beyond reason. But even the most loyal pilot reaches a limit when trust becomes a dependency. Ferrari knows. And that's why it is trapped. Because he needs to demonstrate Leclerc desperately that the SF26 will be revolutionary. But developing a winning car is not a matter of will. It is a matter of planning, investment, structure, and technical talent. And all those elements are scattered today. Mattia Binotto is gone. David Sanchez left. And although Vasseur has brought order and some control, the winning DNA has not yet returned to Maranello. If Leclerc leaves, the blow will be brutal. Not only because they will lose an elite pilot, but because it will be a sign that not even the protagonists themselves believe in the project. It will be the recognition that Ferrari, no matter how much he tries, has failed to reconnect with the winning essence he had in the Schumacher era. And it will be a dangerous precedent. Because if Leclerc runs away, who will want to arrive later? If you choose to stay in Ferrari, you will do it knowing that you are risking your best years in a project that has not yet proven reliable. If he leaves, he will open a new stage in his career that will redefine how he will be remembered. Because his legacy will no longer be played on the track, but also in the offices. In the way in which you manage your future. How to escape the stigma of being the wasted talent, and transforms its story into that of a champion who rebelled against inertia. Each conversation between Nicolas Todt and the leaders of McLaren, Mercedes or Aston Martin is not a betrayal of Ferrari. It is a warning. A reminder that in modern Formula One loyalty is valuable, but it should never be blind. Leclerc is doing what the big ones do. Analyze, compare, project. He is leaving the door ajar, not to flee but to choose from. And that choice, whatever, will have an impact that goes far beyond your individual career. It could redefine the balance of power throughout the grille for the coming years. What would you do instead? If you were Charles Leclerc, would you bet once again for Ferrari, hoping that the SF26 and the regulatory change of 2026 finally bring that long-awaited redemption? Or would you move now, while your value is at its highest point, towards a project that offers you real guarantees to fight for a championship? Do you trust that Ferrari can offer what has been promising for years? Or do you think the time has come for Leclerc to change course? Leave it in the comments.